Hello, welcome to the second installment of my deck presentation series. Today I'll be presenting Sygg, Master of Discard. So something else I'd like to show is how I store my decks. So I've got 3 of these long boxes, 5 commander decks sleeved per box, and I take a box with the extra basic lands for each deck. Right here. And then when I store it on end, the box acts as a weight. Keeps everything flat. Keeps my foils from curling. I don't have any problems at all with curling foils using this method. Let's break out Sygg. So first things first. What does Sygg do? And what does he give me? From what I gather, the typical Sygg builds are tribal rogue. So Sygg is a Merfolk rogue. 2 blue or 2 black, hybrid mana. For 1/3 that if an opponent loses life, 3 or more life at the end of a turn, I may draw a card. In a typical commander game, so he comes out early, doesn't hit very hard, but he's not threatening. Sits around, and in a normal game I draw as many cards as I would off a heuristic study, for example. Usually 1 to 2 cards per turn, depending on how many opponents I have. So let's see what Sygg has. Okay, we start right off with the Brass Squire. So there's a lot of equipment in the deck. Brass Squire is a 3 casting cost 1/3, kind of like Sygg. And his tap ability is attach an equipment I control to a creature I control. So I can do that at instant speed, whenever I bloody will feel like it. Academy Ruins. Nice for getting blown up artifacts back out of my graveyard. Mulldrifter. 5 for a 2/2 that I can evoke. 4/3 comes into play, draw 2 cards. Pretty good flying creature for for the colorless. Usually it's not a problem to cast him. Shadowmage Infiltrator. So a lot of the cards in Sygg are just cards I like. I've always liked Shadowmage Infiltrator. I remember when he was a very popular, very expensive card, back during Odyssey Era Extended rather. And since I had one, and he fit 6 colors, I thought, yeah, I'll give him a go. For a Stronghold, pulls creatures back out of my graveyard. Signed by Kev Walker. I really love signed cards. I love signed cards almost as much as I love foil cards. Teferi, Mage of Salfir. 5 for a 3/3. Flash. Creatures I own that are on the battlefield also flash. And I can cast, each opponent can only cast spells whenever they cast for sorcery. So it speeds me up and slows my opponents down. Reliquary Tower. I have no maximum hand size. Dimir Doppelganger. This is also another card that's kind of in here just for the flavor and because I have one. So 1 colorless, 1 black, 1 blue. For 0/2 that if I spend as casting cost, 1 colorless, 1 black, 1 blue, I can exile a creature from a graveyard and it becomes a copy of that creature. And retains this ability so I can do it again. Crystal Shard. Main use of this card is just to bounce something that's going to get killed back to my hand. Secondary purpose is I have a few cards that have a come into play ability, so I can reuse it. Anyway, it's 3 for an artifact that I can spend 3 colors or 1 blue, tap, to return a creature to another's hand unless they pay 1. And since I'm usually using it on my creatures, I'm not paying. I'm just bouncing. Polluted Delta. Russian. Hypnotic Specter. So being a discard deck, one of the sub-themes are a lot of Spectre-type creatures. I've always liked this art. I've always been fascinated with Hypnotic Specter. It's not a good creature anymore, by any means. 3 for a 2/2 flyer, that when it hits an opponent, they discard a card at random. Usually they don't let it hit them, but it's a fun card. I just like it. Whispersoul Cloak, appropriately enough, we just saw Hypnotic Specter. So if this is on him, it helps him get through in order for me to force my opponents to discard. Island. So in this deck for Sygg, I've got the Lorwyn Islands and the matching Lorwyn Swamps. Just for the art, just because I like all my basic lands to match in any commander deck I build. In any deck I build, actually. Dauthi Mindripper. So this is a 4-cast, cost 2/1 Shadow. I can sacrifice him, and defending player chooses and discards 3 cards. Only if he's attacking him unblocked. Well, since he's got Shadow, and Shadow is not a popular ability, he's probably not going to be blocked. So he's just a threat that sits out there. Damnation. Everything dies. Another island. Hostage Taker. So 4, 2 colors, 1 blue, 1 black. For a 2/3, enters the battlefield, I exile target artifact or creature until it leaves the battlefield, and I can cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and I can spend mana or mana of any color. So this is great with the Crystal Shard. Bring into play, trigger goes on the stack, Shard, return it to my hand, trigger resolves, I exile something permanently. Fencer, Shaper Civil. 4 for a 2/2 flasher. When it enters the battlefield, return target spell or permanent to its owner's hand. Not much to say about that. I'm sure any of my audience is familiar with it. Sunken Ruins, filter land. So I can turn black or blue into more blue, more black, or another black and blue. Voidmage Husher. This card is surprisingly good, surprisingly relevant in a lot of games. So 4 for a 2/2 with flash. It comes to play counter target activated ability. So anything that your opponents are doing that you don't like, activating, say, Mindslaver, come in, counter that ability. They still sacrifice Mindslaver, but they're not taking anybody else's turn. And whenever I play a spell, whenever I cast a spell, I can return this to my hand to do it again. Sakashima the Imposter. 4 for a 3/1 legendary human rogue. So, as you're seeing, I've got a number of rogues in here, and if I wanted to, I could turn it into a tribal rogue deck. But right now, the discard theme is working out quite nicely. So when it comes to play, it copies any creature I want, and it still says it's, when it copies, it's still Sakashima the Imposter. It does not take the name of the creature, so therefore it does not trigger the legendary rule, and I do not have to sacrifice it if I copy one of my own legends. And for its casting cost, 2 and 2 blue, I can return it to my hand at the end of the turn. Again, RTFC, yeah? Underground River. Nini Thomas art. Beautiful. Painful Quandary. Now we're getting into more of the meat of the discard suite. So 3 and 2 black for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, they lose 5 life unless they discard a card. So they have to make a decision. And it's not going to be a good one. Dragonlord Silumgar. 6 for a 3/5 flying Death Toucher. Enters the battlefield, I gain control of target creature or planeswalker for as long as I control him. So again, it's nice with the Crystal Shard. Bring him into play. If the creature or the planeswalker I've stolen gets killed, or there's just something better, I can bounce him back, replay him, take something more interesting. Swamp. Reanimate. Because you never know when something is in the graveyard that you really need to get back. Or it would just be fun to have it back. High Market. Most of my decks do feature High Market because it prevents exile effects on my creatures. Somebody's going to exile on my creatures, Swords Plowshares, Path to Exile, so on. Said I'll sacrifice it myself, send it to my graveyard, so I can get it back eventually. Sword of Light and Shadow. Another part of the returns from the graveyard effects. 3. For an equipment, equipped creature gets +2/+2, protection from white, protection from black. Whenever the equipped creature hits somebody, raise dead, and healing self. Nightveil Specter. 3 hybrid, blue or black, for a 2/3 flyer. Never deals combat damage to a player. That player exiles the top card of the library, and I can play those cards as long as he's in play. Unfortunately, he does not have the subtext where I can spend mana as though a mana of any color. So if I exile something green, I can't cast it. That's not going to happen. So it's a bit of a fun random card. Watery Grave. Equilibrium. Whenever a creature comes into play, if I spend one more, I can bounce another creature. And there's no restriction on whether it's mine or not. So it's a good way of reusing my come into play abilities, or getting rid of a potential threat or something that's just ugly and I don't want to deal with it. Bojuka Bog kills graveyards. Liliana, Waker the Dead. 2 and 2 black for Planeswalker. I have to read this card because I haven't played with this deck in a while, and I forget exactly precisely what she does on a regular basis. So when each player discards a card, each opponent who can't loses 3 life. Okay. -3, target creature gets neg X and neg X until end turn, where X is the number of cards in my graveyard. And it doesn't matter. It can be any kind of card. Or for -7, I get an emblem with at the beginning of combat on my turn, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under my control. It gains haste. I could have Liliana of the Veil in this deck, but I don't know, she's just Waker the Dead just isn't as much of a threat. When people see Liliana the Veil, usually they think some nonsense is about to happen, and they try to stop it. With her, they know some nonsense is going to happen, but it's not as an immediate known threat as Lily of the Veil. Umasawa's Jite. 2 for Legendary Artifact. Equipment. Whenever the equipped creature deals damage, I put 2 charge counters on it. I can remove a charge counter. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 in turn, or target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, or I gain 2 life. For each charge counter represents another activation of any one of these 3 modes. Equip cost is pretty cheap also, 2. So it comes into play quickly and equips quickly. Sturmgeist. 5 for an XX flyer. Power and toughness equal number of cards in my hand. Whenever deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Sweet. And I've just always liked this card. I just love the art. There's just something about it that, I don't know. It's funny and threatening all at the same time. Island. Specter Shroud to go with the Specter sub-theme. 2 for artifact equipment. Equip 1. Equip creature gets +1/+0. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, they discard a card. Arcane Denial. This is not the best counterspell in the world. Not by far. I used to love this in Alliances. I ran it in every blue deck I had, and it took me years before I fully realized this is not a good card because it gives your opponent a card. Actually, 2 cards. So it gives you 1 card at the beginning of the next upkeep, and it gives them 2 cards at the beginning of next upkeep. The reason I do use it in this deck is I'm not too worried about it because of all the discard effects. So the idea is I can counter something, and then when they draw the cards, I'll be forcing them to discard it, regardless. Doesn't always work that way, but that's the idea. Dismember. 1 and 2 black friction mana. Target creature gets -5, -5 until end of turn. Kills all kinds of nasty things dead. Instant, so it's nice to have the option in hand. Doesn't do anything to, I don't know, anything big or planeswalkers, but I like it. Swamp. Ashiok Dreamrender. 1, 2 blue, 2 black hybrid, legendary planeswalker Ashiok. Spells and abilities my opponent's scroll can't make them search the library. No more fetch lands for you. No more vampiric tutor for you. None of that nonsense. Stop it. Target player and -1. He comes to play with 5 loyalty counters. Target player puts top 4 cards of the library into the graveyard. Then everybody else exiles their graveyard, except me. So this is redundancy against graveyard decks, which a few months ago when the group was still together, one guy was playing Mulldrifter, one guy was playing what is his name? Of Clan Toth. I forget her name, but she's the black-green legend that you get experience counters whenever something dies. At the end of the turn, you look at your graveyard, you look at your experience counters, bring a creature back to your hand, and if its casting cost is equal or less to the number of experience counters you had, Mirren of Clan Toth, I think it is. But anyway, this deals with that. Swamp. Russian Dismiss. Counter target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. So somebody's going to Bajuka Bog me. This can stop it. Somebody's going to just cast a spell, and I don't want it. I can counter it. Typically, I wait for the triggered or activated ability part to be relevant. I don't like to just use this on countering a spell. Swamp. Island. Washout. Sometimes this just isn't going to work because everybody else is playing the same color as I am. And I don't want to return my things to my hand. But if a lot of people are playing opposing colors, for example, if one of my friends is playing his Rurik Thar deck, another one is playing his Aurelia deck, and I've got this, then it's perfectly fine. I can